this is a North Carolina team, I think, offensively. And that's been the issue for some of these teams is Duke has just kind of played so well on the offensive side that it's been hard. I mean, think about that. Think about the two teams they played back-to-back in terms of defense, Texas Tech and Arkansas, two of the better defensive teams in the country, and yet there were times where Duke just made it look easy on offense. And I think that's the thing here. And I think, at least on paper, I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. I mean, I really would expect this to be one where, if these two teams keep playing like they have been, I mean, we're talking 80s. I think this is certainly realistic to think that from these two teams.
This is the Phillip Jordan Podcast. I am Phillip Jordan from Last Word on College Football and 96.9 The Legend in Dothan, Alabama, where I'm the in-studio host and producer of Dothan Woods Football. That's right. After over a month hiatus, I'm back behind the microphone doing the thing I love the most, talking sports, talking here on the podcast, and it is a good return episode. The featured guest on today's podcast will be Blake Lovell, which you can check him out over at the Southeastern 14, where him and Chris Lee do a fantastic job keeping you up to date on all things SEC. They got you covered football, basketball, and baseball. The basketball and baseball part doesn't get enough attention, obviously, as the football does. I mean, the football's king. We all know that. But they do a great job with basketball and baseball. And we're going to talk Final Four and SEC kind of season review when it comes to SEC basketball. We'll also talk Texas A&M because, hey, that is the one SEC basketball team still playing right now. It's the Texas A&M Aggies in the NIT. So we'll get Blake's thoughts on all that and more. And then after that, I am going to give my quick thoughts on what's been going on with the NFL free agency, all bunch of just moving around with the NFL. So I'll give my thoughts on that, and then we'll close out the show with some SEC spring questions. And I actually have 3 questions from social media to tackle here on the podcast to close it out. So 3 topics, and that is your topics there. Before we jump into the sports discussion, I'll let you guys know you can find me in the podcast. You can find me on social media at PJordanSEC. Podcast is available on all your favorite podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. You can also check out the show over on YouTube. Just go to Phillip Jordan Sports YouTube channel. Hit that subscribe button. Hit the bell for any notifications. And if you go to any of the videos, and if you leave a comment there, I will also read those on the show. You can always email me at sportstalkphilipjordan@gmail.com. Now we're going to kick things off talking NCAA tournament, and just some quick, thoughts for me before I bring in Blake Lovell. Play my conversation with Blake from earlier on Monday. We recorded early on Monday afternoon. I think the storylines before the tournament have been, everybody's complaining the Elite Eight was not good, which it wasn't. There was a lot of blowouts there, but we get the 14's we get. Obviously Duke and Coach K, the last ride for him. And it's really been interesting. Fullerton, they pretty much took care of business. Fullerton was tough at times, but you never really thought Duke was going to lose that. That game was never in question. Then the Michigan State and Texas Tech games. Both games, Duke had to come back from behind late. The youth on this team, what they're able to do, led by Coach K. Which, you hear Coach K in these interviews talking about there comes a point where it's just players making plays. There's nothing I'm doing here. Very gracious, and it is cool, and you'll hear me and Blake talk about this. We usually don't get Coach K with interviews, in-game, halftime, stuff like that. It's usually John Shire, or in other years it's been another assistant. But it's really been cool seeing him in these moments, this last run, this last dance of him, and really how he has reacted to his players, how you can tell he loves his players. So it's been amazing to see. Sort out with St. Peter's, obviously, what they did, beating Kentucky, first, win over Purdue. I mean, it finally just happened. It struck midnight on Cinderella. When they came out against North Carolina. They missed a bunch of shots early. I think it was 7 or 9-0 early in that game. It just felt like, okay, this is just not going to be St. Peter's night. I mean, in basketball, you can't rule it out that early, but just with the talent that North Carolina had, the way North Carolina's playing, North Carolina better than an 8 seed. They're playing tremendous to get to the Final Four. Of course, now meeting up with Duke. But St. Peter's, what they ever do, they really, all the games they've won in the tournament, they controlled. With their guard play. The guard play was tremendous. I mean, they were outmatched in a lot of these games up front, but what their guards did, just like I said, controlling the tempo, controlling the game, tremendous there, and really, really cool. That was one of the stories. What you like about the tournament? Oh, obviously we get the Blue Bloods. You got Kansas, Villanova. You got Duke and North Carolina. These are traditional teams here. Jay Wright looking for his 3rd national championship. Bill Self looking for his 2nd. He hasn't won one since the late 2000s. I remember Memphis beat Calipari. Mario Chalmers hit that shot against Derrick Rose-led Memphis team way back when. So, and Hubert Davis, his first year as head coach here, replacing Roy Williams. He's done a fantastic job, of course. Coach K, adding to the mantle. If he can close it out with a championship, walking off to the sunset. Now, you will not get my Final Four prediction here on this podcast. I'm going to do that on Thursday's show, and I'll tease the guest at the end of this one. Another thing I'm taking away from this, and I am going to bring it back to college football a little bit, because I was never a fan of the potential for the 12-team playoff. I'll admit that at first. I was more of a 6 or 8 team guy, but I felt it's going to go from 4 to 12. We all know that. It's just a lot of posturing by people being upset because of the SEC. Blah 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 blah. We've gone over this several times, but I will say, college football and the power people need to be paying attention to this NCAA tournament, because yes, we've got the traditional powers like you're going to get in the college football playoff. But what I do see here, what you can look at, man, it's been fun. It's been fun the road to get here, though, hasn't it? Yeah, you got the powers, as I said, and the traditional teams or the usual suspects would be the Final Four in college football tournament. If you did a 12-team tournament, I have a feeling you would get some really, really cool, fun games on the way there. I mean, you'd have some dominant wins by the Big Four or who would get there, which I also think one of those teams would probably struggle with somebody too as well. But you'd get some fun games on the way, and that's what we got here. So I think college football people, you need to really pay attention to this and kind of take that in consideration when it comes to the 12-team playoff. And if you just like it at 4, because you say if you go to 12, the same teams are going to win it. That might be true. The top teams are going to be there. The best teams are going to be at the top. It's not that way in college basketball. We don't usually get these 4 like this, the traditional teams, but this is how it's going this year. But it's fun getting there. It's the journey. It's the journey to get to these games, I think, is the part that college football can take away from this. And that's kind of like what been my thoughts after the teams that have advanced to the Final Four and kind of really given it a lot of thought. All right, those are just some thoughts I had on the tournament as we are now, like I said, going into the Final Four this Saturday. Now I'm going to play my conversation I had early on Monday with Blake Lovell from the Southeastern 14. Now, I will let everybody know the audio quality on my end dips a little bit here. I recorded the conversation using my phone, not my Blue Yeti microphone I'm talking to now. But I think you're really enjoying my conversation with Blake Lovell.
Everybody joining me on the show today on the return episode of the podcast. I'm joined by Blake Lovell. You can check him out over at the Southeastern 14. And him and Chris Lee. I think you guys have been doing 2 pods a day. I mean, y'all are all over the place. Y'all are 7 days a week. But appreciate you coming on, and it's been an interesting road to the Final Four without a doubt.
Yeah, no, appreciate it as always having me, Phillip. Yeah, we got in a bit of a grind there for a while, and doing a couple these video episodes and stuff a day. But yeah, kind of sit back and relax a little bit. Although, as we know, SEC baseball is in full swing now, so we'll probably jump right into that. But Yeah, it's certainly for basketball. It was an interesting road to the Final Four. Of course, no SEC teams in there, but you had one SEC team kind of try to carry the banner a little bit, but everyone else not an ideal NCAA tournament this year, I think, for the league.
Yeah, it's interesting. We have all these upsets, all these big teams that went fell, but at the end of the day, we have 4 blue bloods playing for it all starting Saturday. So it's kind of like the interesting thing is just your tournament. You think, okay, there's going to be Cinderellas or teams you're not expecting, but then you get 4 blue bloods. What commercial is it? I'm forgetting off the top of my head. It's the Snoop Dogg commercial where they talk about the shades of blue.
Yeah,
it seemed like they were foreshadowing everything for the Final Four.
Yeah, I just say that's a good point. They had all the blue there for sure, but yeah, I mean that's what we always say about the tournament. We know why everyone loves it. It's really the first 2 days is really the most interesting part, because that does set the tone for the entire tournament. And it's, even though it usually winds up with kind of the scenario we got here with Duke, Carolina, Kansas, and Villanova, it's just who are going to be those teams that could get there, that get knocked out early. And of course, I think we can point to teams like Kentucky this year and ones like that you never know. And I think that's what makes the tournament so interesting is, yes, all those Elite Eight games were not great, but really everything leading up to it, and I'm sure the Final Four itself, they just give you these wild games, some with, unpredictable results, but more often than not, it seems that at the end of the day, once you get to the actual Final Four, there's usually a lot of teams in there that, have certainly earned that spot without question, but it is a lot of these teams that are, higher seeds, and of course North Carolina is a little bit different, but as we know, they have not played like an 8 seed at all. That's more on the full body of work. And so, it should be a great, great Final Four for sure.
It just popped in my head, and this is just about the coverage of the tournament. And I mentioned this, I think, on Twitter on the first day of it. But I want you to put it, if you were one of these coaches, I know part of them can't be thrilled when they have to go over there in the middle of in the first half and go do those interviews. I mean, they're cool, and all the coaches have been great with it. But I know there's got to be a part of them that's like, I really don't want to have to go over here and do this while we're in the heat of the game like this.
Yeah, I've said this many times. Like, I think the people who do the interviews, like, they are brave souls, because I would want no part of that. And I'll be honest with you, there are times where, like, I have to, like, I will turn the volume down on the in-game interviews. Like, I just know the coaches, like, I can see some of them just, like, boiling over because they really want to be yelling at their team at that moment or doing something else. But, no, I mean, in all seriousness, that's one of the things I can't stand it. But I get why they do it, because, I think it's sort of, I don't know, we saw like the NBA adopted, and, that's kind of just become one of the things where you're going to get it now. But I do. And as a former, coach myself, I know that, working for people and being in that spot sometimes, of course, not to that extent on national television, but just like you are so in the zone on what you want your team to do. And, those timeouts, even though it feels like a lot to people who are watching the games, you want every timeout you can have in the span of a 40-minute basketball game, because you want every opportunity to find that little bitty detail to really stress to your team. So, yeah, I'm with you. I love all the sideline reporters. I have nothing against them because they have a really hard job. But, it's not exactly something I think does really a whole lot of anything for me. So.
Yeah, and, or at least a good thing is we finally get some sideline interviews with Coach K. We don't get John Shire over there talking for him instead. We actually get Coach K, as you know, which is always good.
Yeah, that's true.
But you're looking at these matchups, and I look at North Carolina and Duke, and, going in, and I saw some people tweet this out. Either way, Duke was probably going to have one of the most hyped matchups. Either they're going to be playing the ultimate David versus Goliath matchup at St. Petersburg, but now they're playing North Carolina rivalry game. I mean, it almost is like Duke's almost could get a mulligan or just a redemption from that last game at home, when they lost to North Carolina. Now they get to play each other again. Like you said, North Carolina's not playing like an 8 seed. They're playing like a 1 or 2 seed the way they've been playing. And then Duke, I mean, I know against Arkansas they trailed early, but and midway through the first half they really extended the lead and took it in the second half at points there. When you look at this matchup, just the way these two match up, just what sticks out to you with this matchup with Duke and North Carolina, especially how they've been playing here in the tournament?
Yeah, I mean, it is so interesting to think of how this is all set up. And, it really was a scenario where I thought Texas Tech would beat Duke. I thought that was the team that would probably have the best chance to stop them just because of how they played defense. And, it's not to say that North Carolina can't do some of those things too, because just in terms of, how they're playing. But this is a North Carolina team, I think, offensively. And then that's been the issue for some of these teams is Duke has just kind of played so well on the offensive side that it's been hard. I mean, think about that. Think about the two teams they played back-to-back in terms of defense, Texas Tech and Arkansas, two of the better defensive teams in the country, and yet there were times where Duke just made it look easy on offense. And I think that's the thing here. And I think, at least on paper, I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. I mean, I really would expect this to be one where, if these two teams keep playing like they have been, I mean, we're talking 80s. I think this is certainly realistic to think that from these two teams because, again, good defensive teams, but they're not teams that turn the other team over very much. And that means that, the other team should get a chance to run their offense, have an opportunity, and we know both will at times get up and down the floor. And so I think that's really what you look at here and say, wow, this could really be a game where offense is going to reign supreme based on how these two are playing. But, there are a lot of similarities between these two teams. I mean, there really are in terms of, looking at the size, like both very good size, whether it's, Armando Bacot or whether it's Banchero or Williams or those guys on Duke. Like, it's just, I mean, there's so much size out there on the floor. And, of course, Brady Manick and what he's done for Carolina this year. It's a really fascinating matchup. Like you said, this is one of those where it's either you think about the two ways this could go. Either Duke gets the ultimate redemption on Carolina for Carolina beating them in Coach K's final home game, and then Duke's one win away from the national championship in Coach K's last season, or Carolina beats Duke again and not only ends Coach K's career at Cameron with a loss, but ends his coaching career with a loss in the Final Four to his most, biggest rival. Boy, that is, you just could not. I mean, you mentioned earlier, Phillip, it's the Duke-St. Peter's game would have been fascinating for a lot of reasons, but there's no way it would have been able to match what's at stake here and the possible storyline coming out of it on either side, no matter who wins this game.
Yeah, I think Duke fans will not ever want to be around another North Carolina fan if that happens.
Yeah.
Because they're going to go around and say, "We retired Coach K. We retired Coach K." That's going to be the deal there. And with North Carolina, the guards have been really good. Kayla Love, Licky Black, just to name two of them. Going up against Duke's guards too as well. And I want to get your thoughts. With Banchero, obviously a guy coming in the season. I remember early on he was one of the three guys to go number one. Obviously going to be a lottery pick. I mean, we're watching him play more than likely his last games at Duke. What's been your assessment of his development, seeing him play in the tournament?
Yeah, I mean, he's just, he's one of those guys where you see guys sometimes and it's just like, okay, obviously these guys are developed and they, have honed their game, but like to me, he's also one where it's just, you watch him play and you're like, that guy's just a natural. Like he's just a natural star basketball player. Like he's basically built himself the ultimate sort of skill set to where, he does so many things well and he just makes it. That's one of the things I think I mentioned against Arkansas. I want to say, like, it just makes it look effortless at times where it's just, it doesn't even look like he has to try to just do all the things that he does. And, but yeah, I mean, he's no doubt. I mean, he has just been someone that is really, you kind of see just how he's developed his game. And like you said, I think he's easily a top 5 pick, probably at worst at this point, just based on what he's done this season and really down the stretch, how he's really turned it up a notch even more. And I think that's it. Like when you have a player like this, we have to remember too, and I always think about this when we talk about players like him, like he's still a freshman. Like he has got so long to go in terms of when he's going to actually reach his peak. And like, he's not even close yet to doing that. And I think that's the scary part. And you've seen that in some of these games in the NCAA tournament is, he makes it look easy. And I think for him, he's going to have a very successful NBA career. And again, I think it's just because he's just a natural. Like he gets it. He has the awareness and, he understands that he has the skill set to take over a game anytime he wants to. And he's not someone that's passive in doing that. Like he actively does that in these games. And that's a big reason why Duke's 2 wins away from the national championship.
The other game in Villanova and Kansas, put their best performance of the tournament on Sunday in the second half, outscoring Miami 47-15 after they were trailing at halftime. And I look at Kansas, and what's going to stick out to me for me watching the tournament, their guys off the bench. They've got 2 guys, and Remy Martin and Mitch Lightfoot. You bring them off the bench, and they're just as good as most team starters. And then Villanova, of course, the defensive battle they had with Houston, obviously the big blow losing Justin Morrow. What sticks out to you with this matchup going between these two?
Yeah, I think that second half for Kansas, that just showed, they can be scary good whenever it's all clicking, and I think that's one where, Kansas kind of had an interesting season. They had the game against Kentucky. I think a lot of people jumped off the Kansas bandwagon after that one because they just saw how Kentucky just completely did anything they wanted, really, at the end of January in that game in the SEC Big 12 Challenge, and then had some of those games down the stretch where they lose at Baylor, lose at TCU. Those are nothing to be upset about. But I think there were still a lot of questions about Kansas in terms of, all right, can they turn it on? Can they hit that next gear? And as we've seen going through the Big 12 tournament, now getting to this point, they've just got all the confidence in the world, and we saw that in the second half. They did not panic, and that to have the second half they did and win that game by 26 points when Miami was in complete control of that game for 20 minutes, basically. That is just a remarkable thing that they did in that one. And I think for Villanova, like you said, the injury to Moore is just, it's so hard, I think, to know how this game plays out, without him on the floor. And I think that's something that really, is the big question here. But I also think that there's something to the fact that, look, we know that Jay Wright has been here before, and he's one of the guys that has 2 recent national championships, and he's put himself in a position over the past 5, 6, 7 years that these other guys have done before. But it's just, he's done it at the top level, just like all these other coaches that are in this. Of course, Hubert Davis, we know, just took over from North Carolina, but the programs are the bigger focus on this. And I think this is another one where, I'm probably going to lean Kansas here just because the Moore injury. I think that's natural for most people to kind of look at it that way and see that, when we saw kind of how Kansas finished that game against Miami and you just look at what they can do on both sides. This is another game where I think you got 2 teams that are similar in different ways, if that makes sense. Like they, obviously when you have a team like Villanova who's going to shoot the 3 really well, but Kansas defends the 3 really well, and then you look at Kansas. They're not necessarily going to get a ton of their points from the 3-point line, but we know how efficient they are inside the arc. And just a lot of little things like that, I think, with these 2 teams. And, again, 2 teams kind of very similar in size, although, McCormick's still going to be the biggest guy on the floor for sure for Kansas. But I think this will be a good game, but I think also, it is one where without Moore, I'm very curious to see what adjustments are made on Villanova's side. But I think right now I probably would lean Kansas just because, we are looking at a team that if they had any, questions about their confidence at halftime in Miami, it's all back now after what they did in the second half. So.
Yeah, you got that. With think Colin Gillespie's going to have a little bit more pressure on them now to do even more with Moore not back there with them. Yeah,
no, that's a good point. He's already someone that we know is going to be kind of the focus, a lot of what they want to try to do offensively. And, not having him. And, that's where it's going to, it's going to come down to guys like, look at the tournament that Jermaine Samuels has had. He's had a really good tournament, and I think that's going to be necessary in a game like this. Obviously, like we said, especially when you consider that McCormick's on the other side and you kind of know, again, size-wise, what you're going to get at times with this team. And, it's another one. Certainly everybody's going to look at this as the second game because, it's going to be played first. But in terms of storylines, it's not going to be one that has as much as the other. But you're still talking about 2 really great and efficient type basketball teams. And I think it's really a matter of the pace. Villanova does not want this game necessarily to be run up and down the floor type style. Meanwhile, Kansas does. I think that's where this game really will be told, is if Villanova can control the pace and make this, a game that's played in the half court, I think they've got a great chance to win. If Kansas can speed them up, make them take a lot more shots and really just kind of push the pace a bit, and I think that plays into Kansas's advantage.
No, and as we look at the SEC, after, obviously Arkansas was the last team remaining there in the Elite Eight, and, and I felt like going into the tournament, the SEC was the best conference this year. I'm maybe a little biased because where I live at, but I did feel that way with the talent and just the teams that got in there. And then you get Alabama, LSU, and Kentucky. They go out in the first round, Auburn, Tennessee in the second. Of course, like I said, Arkansas did get all the way to the Elite Eight. Where are you at on this year, just this past season, when you kind of look back at the SEC?
Yeah, I think, and, there's a lot of schools of thought here. I'm on one side. There are a lot of people on the other side. We've seen all the talk about, the ACC and the NCAA tournament and how that just proves that the ACC did not have a bit of a down year as compared to others. I don't buy that necessarily. I think that we're talking about two different things here, and I don't think you can necessarily group together the regular season and the tournament, because going back to the start of our conversation, what did we say? We said the reason why people love the tournament so much is that you're going to get some of those very low probability upsets that happen on the first 2 days, that if you play that out 10 times, it's probably something that happens once or twice. And I think that's just what you get with a single elimination tournament. And so sometimes I think that, again, for the SEC, we saw it, Phillip. I mean, everyone's just dogging on the SEC after the first weekend. It's, the SEC's overrated. They didn't have a good season. We're talking about two different things here. We're talking about the SEC had a really good 35-game, 36-game regular season, but they didn't have a great 1-game or 2-game tournament. So to me, if I'm doing the math, and trust me, I am by no means a math wizard, I think there's still value to that 35 or 36-game season that came before the 1 or 2 game stretch in the tournament. Although we know it's not as easy as that. It's not just black and white. You have to add context, and the context is obviously it means more now. And this is what you build up to, is to get to this point to have the success in the tournament. From that standpoint, very disappointing for the SEC. But I don't think you can just say that the SEC was overrated based on losing a random probability-based tournament where matchups are everything. Those kind of things just happen. We see it time and time again. We've seen it for decades, that this just happens sometimes. The SEC is not the first league that's happened to, won't be the last. And I don't think that's necessarily I don't think we have to go as far as to say the SEC was terrible in the regular season. They were overrated just because of a sample size of 5 or 6 games in an NCAA tournament, even though, again, I understand what we mean by the importance of it, but I don't in any way think the SEC was overrated in the regular season. I think it's just, again, it's all about matchups, and the SEC plays a style. At least we've seen it in recent years, and we've probably talked about this, Phillip. It's not a league that three-point shooting is the primary focus. It's a league where free throws are a lot of points. Again, we could go down that rabbit hole of how the league's called, but it's a very physical, aggressive style of play, and sometimes when you get to a tournament setting against a team you haven't seen before, those kind of things don't always play in your advantage. And I think that's just, again, it's the NCAA tournament, and I think we're having two different discussions when it comes to, was the SEC disappointing in the tournament? Absolutely. Was the SEC really good in the regular season? Absolutely. I don't think they have to be one and the same.
Yeah, I'm 100% in agreement with you on that. It's all about, to bring up Auburn, the regular season champions, and you saw as they went into the tournament, they had been on a little bit of a slide. They were, since they were ranked number 1, you could see they had some close games against Missouri and Georgia. They got beat by some better teams, especially when they went on the road. When they were away from Auburn, they were just a different team. Was their slide something that was kind of hinted at before that happened, or I guess what I'm asking is, what do you think happened to Auburn down the stretch?
I think it's not the exact same, but I think there are some similarities when we look at Auburn and Kentucky, because, the two teams we really talked about down the stretch, I think the two teams that are playing the best in the SEC were Arkansas and Tennessee. Now, we saw what Arkansas wound up doing from that. And Tennessee, gets a pretty tough draw in the second round, let's be honest. Michigan was a preseason top 10 team. And we knew if they put it all together, they were good enough to win that game. But I think for Auburn and Kentucky, the signs were there. Auburn, just the guard play, I think the lack of the three-point shooting, which we just talked about,
Like, it was very clear. And that's where, to me, Auburn was the kind of team that ran into, A, a team that got really hot at the right time in Miami, and B, a team that could, if they got a lead on Auburn, knowing that this is a team that's just really struggled to shoot the ball. The guard play hasn't been great. And when you figure in, Walker Kessler only played, not many minutes at all in that game, it was just the ultimate, thing. But that was something we had seen before. And I think that sometimes now we have to look at it and say, well, maybe we need to pay more attention to that, when it comes to that sometimes. Just if you see a team that's really kind of struggling down the stretch, maybe there's something to that. And again, it's not to say Auburn was struggling from a win standpoint. They were winning a lot of games, but there were some of those things that started to become noticeable. And, again, that's where matchups are everything. And they just ran into a team matchup-wise in Miami that could exploit a lot of their problems that they had had. And I think it's the same for Kentucky. When you look at Kentucky, their half-court offense going into the SEC tournament was brutal. It was not very good. And I think that's something where it was clear, not just to me, but to Kentucky fans. Like, they knew that this was to be a potential problem. And what happens? They play one of the better half-court defensive teams, and even though they're a 15 seed, like we saw, the reason St. Peter's made a run to the NBA is because their half-court defense was so good. And that put Kentucky in a spot where you probably shouldn't be in that spot, to where you're just that bad offensively at times, where they just could not find any rhythm down the stretch. But that, again, comes down to the matchup. If Kentucky plays, I don't even know, I'm trying to think of some of the other 15 seeds. Kentucky's probably, it's like Kentucky's probably having a chance to play this weekend, right? Like, they're probably maybe close to the Final Four. Maybe it's, Kentucky, Carolina for the spots in the Final Four, but they just happen to play the probably worst 15 seed they could have found based on what their issue was heading into the tournament. So, again, it's all about matchups, and if you really dive into that pretty deep, shocking to Kentucky's standpoint, absolutely. But if you really just looked at it from a matchup standpoint, Auburn, Kentucky, those kind of teams, you could see some of the issues, and it really was, boy, wrong draw, and maybe this could happen. And, yeah, that's just kind of how it played out. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and as you said, those two, you saw it. And I guess the Tennessee thing, with Michigan, which I ran my mouth, I think on Twitter, I said, on one of my social media things, I said Michigan does not deserve to be in there. I don't think I have a lot of people in Michigan that follow me, so it's probably a good thing. But on that. Before let's go, I thought we'll keep it around 20 minutes. There's a team in the SEC that is still playing basketball this week, and that is Texas A&M. Just real quickly, will Texas A&M win the NIT by the end of the week?
I think they're in a decent enough spot. I mean, I think that, there's going to be a team that was left out, and you looked at it from a motivational standpoint and the coach and those kind of things. Like, Buzz was going to be the one that would get his team in the spot to be able to be motivated enough to say, we all saw it. We saw Buzz's speech when they got left out after the first NIT game. He laid it out there and, said basically this is that. We should have been in the tournament. And 95% of the people out there agreed, I'm pretty sure, if you really did look at the numbers. But, for them to win the NIT, which I think they got a great shot to do. I mean, Washington State's a tough team, great coach. But I think they got a shot to win that one. And then I think, again, Xavier, St. Bonaventure, and A&M can beat both of those teams. If they were to win this, I would love it just because, it really is kind of the ultimate middle finger, basically. Let's just call it what it is to the play, right, for leaving them out of the tournament. But yeah, that's what you want to see. I think if you're motivation, and people laugh at it sometimes, but my goodness, Phillip, we've watched NIT games over the years. Motivation accounts for a lot in the NIT because you have to have guys that want to be there and want to play these games and understand that these are still important from a program standpoint, and you don't always get that. And I'm not blaming the players for it because, again, there are some teams that get left out and just so stunned that it's hard to get up for an NIT game. But A&M's kind of figured it out, and they played really well. And I think they got a great chance to win this thing. I hope they do, just because, again, that would sort of be the ultimate signal, I think, to everyone out there. And like we said, that's something, too, where you have to separate it from what happens in the tournament to what, happens. It's like, well, Notre Dame managed to, win a couple games, beat Alabama. They should have been over A&M. That's not the discussion we're having, right? It's the discussion of pure data and where things were heading into the tournament. And the data seems to suggest that Texas A&M was a team that should have gotten in. And for them to be the fourth team left out or whatever it was, just pure absurdity. There's just no reason they should have been left out of the tournament when you really look at their resume. So, I think they're in a really good position to win this thing.
All right. Well, the SEC will have, like I said, they got one of the SEC teams still playing, so I can have that championship. And I agree with you on the motivation thing. I've always said this, made this comparison. The NIT and early bowl games in college football. Motivation. You find out who wants to be there, who doesn't want to be there very quick, and then those teams in the NIT wants, and then they end up being the ones, that do go far. That first round, you kind of eliminate the teams that don't want to be there. But anyway. And Blake, I do appreciate you coming on the show. I know I kept you a little bit longer than I said I would, but it's been a fun conversation talking college and SEC basketball. If the listeners want to check you out online, where they can find you and about all the great stuff y'all are doing over at the Southeastern 14.
Yeah, I always appreciate it, Phillip. Like you said, the Southeastern14.com will have a lot of SEC basketball wrap-up stuff, just kind of looking back at the season and all of that. But as we know, things don't stop beyond basketball. There's baseball in full swing, football, spring games, not far away. So, yeah, there's a lot happening, and you can check it all out at Southeastern14.com and follow me on Twitter at Blake Lovell.
All right, sounds good, Blake. Once again, I appreciate the time, and I look forward to doing this again sometime down the road.
Sounds great, Phil. Thanks, man.
Thanks again to Blake for coming on the show. Really, really fun conversation there, talking all things Final Four, SEC basketball, and some NIT conversation here on the podcast on this Tuesday edition of the Phillip Jordan podcast. Now, I'm going to transition into a little bit on the NFL, and these next two topics I'm not going to stay too long because I'm trying to keep the podcast at a not too long of a length here. All the quarterback movement. And there's one thing since the trade went down, and of course I haven't done a podcast in over a month, so there's a lot of stuff out there I haven't been able to talk to you guys about that I want to. And like I said, I'm going to do this briefly and not spend too much time on some of these topics. When Russell Wilson got traded to Denver, everybody said the receivers are better in Denver. He has more weapons. Are we taking some respect off of DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett a little bit here? Those are two really good receivers. And if I was the Green Bay Packers, I'd be sending that draft pick to Seattle to get one of them. I would take those two over what Denver's got at receiver. Every time. Over, I don't know. I have not liked that commentary. I do not think that's correct. I'm not saying those guys are bums versus what Metcalf and Lockett are, but those two are established. They've played in bigger games. I just think that was ridiculous. People were saying that. The Deshaun Watson thing, look, the press conference on Friday was not a good look for him. Just some things he said. It's just a bad look overall. You know why the Browns did that on a Friday. They did that because they knew, hey, it's Friday, not a lot of people pay attention. We'll do it here. By the time we get to Monday, there'll be other stuff going on the weekend. People will not be talking about this. That's why you do that. Obviously, it's an upgrade in talent over Baker Mayfield, which Baker Mayfield hasn't helped at all with some, how he acts. That's just, it'll be interesting where he goes. But yeah, the Deshaun Watson stuff, like I said, obviously an upgrade in talent, but I'm just not. It's just not a good look. He was out a year. He's got the 22, accusations. I guess we'll say we'll go with that word, and selling that to your fan base. Now, there's going to be fans that are going to be super excited because they have a brand new quarterback, and he is an upgrade in talent, as I've said. But what are you saying to your female fan base, and especially when he's got such a big contract that no one else has really had? It's just, I don't know. It doesn't sit right with me. What's going on there? I think the Bills should be the favorite, especially in the AFC. If we're going right now in March, which is pre-draft, the draft has not happened, obviously. But if we're looking at things right now, especially with the Chiefs trading Tyreek Hill to Miami, now they do bring MVS in from Green Bay, but he's not Tyreek Hill. I would, if I was power ranking, I was doing my NFL top 10, which I'm not, I would put Buffalo ahead of Kansas City. I mean, Kansas City's going to go through a gauntlet in that division with the Raiders. You know, they got, Devontae Adams, Russell Wilson there, and then in Denver, then you got obviously Justin Herbert. And then you look at the Colts with what they got. Good offensive line, Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman receiver, a good young receiver, a solid defense. And then you got Matt Ryan. And then I remember points of last season, you would have put that Colts team up there. If they could have got the playoffs, they were playing really, really well at one point until the last week or two of the season. Then Carson Wentz mistakes, and they obviously said, we can't win with this guy. Let's get him out. And they upgraded a quarterback, without a doubt, with Matt Ryan, and put Matt Ryan in good position to be on a good team. Now, that conference is just loaded. A lot of the Bengals did address their offensive line. That was important. I think Baltimore's going to be back next season if injuries don't strike them. And they had so many injury issues this past year with them. Steelers or Trubisky, I mean, it's the Steelers are down the road on there. The NFC, of course, Aaron Rodgers is back with Green Bay, but what's the receiving core? I mean, that's really, they've got to answer that question now with Devontae Adams gone. But when you look at it on the other side of things, the last two regular seasons, they were 7-0 without Devontae Adams. But it all comes down to Aaron Rodgers. He signed all that money, 3 years, $150 million. But it comes down, for me, playoff time. He can have a great regular season, win another MVP, which I doubt they'll give it to him 3 years in a row, but you never know. But I will say it comes out of postseason. Aaron Rodgers has got to be the man and take that team to a Super Bowl. And that's just what it comes down to. With Tom Brady coming back, I think the Packers and the Buccaneers are your two favorites. I think the Rams be up there too, but I feel like the Rams, they put so much into that Super Bowl that, just getting that one. I'm just wondering if there's going to be a little bit of a hangover from their standpoint, and I don't trust Dallas. I mean, that's talent-wise the teams you would consider. But to me, it's Tampa Bay or Green Bay in the NFC. So it's been wild, and I didn't touch on everything, but that's just kind of like a few thoughts I had on what's been going on in NFL free agency over the past month. All right, and the third and final topic here on the Phillip Jordan podcast, we're going to answer some questions I put on Facebook and Twitter. What were some questions people had for their teams going into spring practice, which, of course, I have a heavy SEC following, which we'll to expand now, but heavy SEC following. So I had 3 questions involving 3 different SEC schools on some spring questions. We'll start off with Brandon Maddox. Will our offensive line be as good or better than last year? He's talking about Tennessee. We look at Tennessee. I think they can be just as good. Saying they're better is difficult, and here's why. You do return 4 starters, but the one you lost was an all-SEC performer in right tackle, Cade Mays. So he's gone. Now, from reports what's been going on with the program, they have flipped left tackle Darnell Wright to right tackle, but he played right tackle as a freshman sophomore. He started 13 games in 2021. So when you lose a guy like Cade Mays, it's kind of hard to say, hey, you're going to be better. But just as good, I do think they can do that. Better, we'll have to wait and see. David Knight, colleague over at Last Word on College Football. Are our offensive line struggles a thing of the past? Of course, David covers South Carolina. Now, for South Carolina, the positive for them on the offensive line. Now, I love the offensive line questions. Not enough of that on other shows to listen to. People want to hear about the offensive line. All 5 starters do return for South Carolina. But the problem was last season there was inconsistency. You had other people start. You need that unit to be consistent. Have that 5 out there together as much as possible. I've always viewed the offensive line as team within team. Those 5 guys got to work together, unlike any other position group. And when they are not on the field together a lot, when there's different combinations, different units, you seem to have that issue. But if they can keep the 5 together, I do think South Carolina can put a good group together. But that's going to be the key. Keep them healthy and keep those guys, continuity. Very, very important there. The last question, Brandon Eiserman. Who wins the starting job at LSU is the biggest question surrounding that program. Should be interesting to watch it unfold. Very intriguing. And this news of another LSU quarterback coming in happened the week after I decided we went on break here. Miles Brennan, of course, he transferred back into the program, which was big. Gave Brian Kelly a lot of stability within the quarterback room with Miles Brennan coming back. And Miles Brennan, and I've said this a lot of times, and a lot of other people have said this as well. The 2020 season, the first 3 games, he was playing really well, then he got hurt. Then last year, he got hurt for the season. So you never been able to see Miles Brennan just get that opportunity to be the guy. You're thinking, okay, he stays healthy through the spring, through the fall, he's going to be the quarterback. But now you get Arizona State transfer Jaden Daniels coming in. That changes things because he's not coming to LSU to sit on the bench, but Miles Brennan didn't come back to LSU to sit on the bench. Both these guys are wanting to play. Of course, Daniels obviously has the more being able to go off schedule. When plays break down, he can make plays. Miles Brennan is more your traditional pocket passer, which we've seen a lot with Brian Kelly at Notre Dame. Ian Book, Jake Cohn to be examples. But Jaden Daniels can just bring a different element to it. So it's going to be interesting. Brandon is right. A very intriguing quarterback battle that maybe a month ago you didn't think you'd have, but now you do have at LSU. Super, super intriguing what's going on there. And a little news note, of course, the team I covered, Auburn Tigers. Jarquez Hunter, injured, so he's going to be limited. You won't see him much in the spring or at all. I think that's actually a positive in a way for Auburn. You don't want to play hurt. I'm not saying the injury is a positive, but him not playing, because now you know who Tank Bixby is. You know what you got. And Jarquez Hunter, I think you got a good idea. And, obviously he's going to be the number 2 running back. But I will give some other guys some opportunities to step up and show what they have here in spring. More opportunities. And because I think Auburn needs to find that third back, because you never know if Tank or Hunter goes down, you're going to need to call on somebody to be that other running back. And that's going to be key, and get some good experience for whoever the next Auburn guy is. But on Thursday, we'll be back on Thursday. I will be joined by Brian Jones from popculture.com. We're going to jump a bunch of stuff. I've already recorded our conversation. You'll even get some wrestling talk in there. We are going to talk. Now, there'll be some NFL. We'll talk the Atlanta Falcons. We're going to talk Matt Ryan. We'll talk the Packers. We'll talk Atlanta Braves. And we'll also get Brian's predictions for the Final Four. You'll get mine to open the show. And then you'll get my conversation with Brian Jones. And I know this podcast probably went lengthy. I'm going to try to keep these at the 30 to 40 minute range, especially as I'm going to do multiple a week. But, today I'm back doing this for the first time in a month. A lot to talk about, a lot to get out of the system. And this felt good. It felt good talking to you guys. Really enjoyed this. This is got reminded why I like doing this, why I like getting behind this microphone, talking, and hopefully a lot of people out there listening and enjoying it. Remember, you can follow me on social media at PJordanSCC. The podcast is available Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, please follow, rate, and review. Leave a review. I will read it on a future edition of the show. Also, YouTube, follow on YouTube. Hit that subscribe on Phillip Jordan Sports YouTube channel. Also, hit that bell to get all the notifications when a new video is available. And if you leave a comment on a video, I will read that on a future edition as well. You can always email me at sportstalkphilipjordan@gmail.com. And it's good to be back. Good to be doing this again. I'll talk to you guys on Thursday. And let's be good to each other, and hope everybody has a great few days till we talk again on Thursday. And let's all let kindness be our compass. Till next time, bye-bye.